observation that he, I mean, so clear, all of these things that happened in his past. And that keen eye that he's always had in life, and there's many, many more stories you could hear.
Yeah,
but that keen eye is what makes him such an amazing artist, because he does see the world in a very unique and precise way. And if you could have known his mother, she was like, Carol was just amazing. And she taught you boys, I think you didn't wander too far from home, but she taught you to observe everything around you, right?
She had, we didn't know what it was at the time, but she had some serious social anxiety issues, and it was probably, my dad was becoming a heavy drinker, and that probably had a lot to do with it. But in that, she never really let us know that it was any kind of a problem, but she would deal with the anxiety by like taking long walks in cornfields and finding arrowheads, which she found thousands and thousands of them. And, we would walk along with her, and she would explain to us, that quite often the most incredible thing you're going to see in a day just might be right there. It's not, in Timbuktu, it's not in the next state. It might be just right in front of you, but it's not if you don't look.
And skies, she talked
Skies
about weather
and
skies and
yeah,
climate.
She and Eric Sloan were pretty good friends at one point, but I think as a result of that, not such a long relationship, but she was very influenced by his knowledge of weather, and to this day, I know when it's going to rain. I know that, when you're painting landscape, you better know, because you don't want to set up and have everything there, and then all of a sudden it's raining. But she was really, really crux. So my grandmother Louise was. She was an excellent artist, and she went to the New York Academy, I believe, in like 1915. And was a really incredible draftsperson, and they had her designing wallpaper, I think, at the time, which was kind of what women were allowed to do. Sadly, they didn't get to be artists; they had to do some sort of industrial skill. And then my Aunt Jean was from what I've heard, it may not be true, but I think it is, was the first woman jewelry designer for Cartier in New York. So there's a strong vein of creative people before me, and all of them let me know that, because I drew all the time, and once they saw that, they felt like that was something to perpetuate, which they did. And it was, that group of people that really kind of allowed me to get going on what I do now, and thankfully I'm still doing.
And I think it's interesting because this area has this great history of creative people still today, and all through it, with writers and artists and Sondheim, and on and on and on. And I think it's fascinating that your family had this creative streak, and that they came here.
We're totally undiscovered.
Until you.
In Warren, like I said, Warren was filled with these notables, and I remember my brother first started cleaning Philip Roth's pool, and I picked up the slack after he went to college. And Philip Roth was a prince. I mean, there's many things that have been written about him, whatever, misogynist, you can say what you want. I knew him as a guy who hired me every year to move his furniture. I mowed his lawn. We had conversations that were, I just wish I'd recorded them, because he was such
and
a
again,
really.
you're what, 14, 15?
No, I'm like 16 at this time.
Okay.
And so one fine day, it was before Dean stopped, and he was kind of outshadowing him, and we were doing the backwashing of the pool, but there were people out of the pool, and we had to go ask Phil a question. And we come out, there's Claire Bloom, lovely. Phil, hi. Linda Lovelace? That was a shocker. And she didn't have a top on, so it was really something for a 16-year-old. Something I revisit often. It was.
And I'm sure he loved every minute.
Oh, he was laughing. He was laughing, and he caught up with us. We were going out of the car. He's like, "What do you think about that?" But he was a really cool guy, and I don't know. I don't know where I was going with
that's enough, that was a
Okay.
Don't do it further.
So obviously, a lot of you have histories and live on the lake or anything, so if you have any other questions, then feel free.
I have a question, because it's so wonderful to have painted the same landscape at different points in your life and being able to look from your 16-year-old self to your obviously only 45-year-old self. And your 45-year-old self looking back at your 16. How does that reflect in your paintings?
Well, I think you have to, I really think I remember and try to appreciate where I am at any time, you know, and, you see what we moved away from on the lake and what it's become, and, you know, those changes are, you can't stop a beautiful place from developing, it just is doing that and will continue to, but I think you remember to like freeze the moment if you can, and that seeing and looking and staying in a place to paint something, not just taking the obligatory photograph and then
Yeah.
bringing it home. Because you can do that, and you get more accurate paintings probably, and people can go like, oh my God, looks just like a photograph. Yeah, but that's not what I want. I want people to say, wow, that looks like a mindograph, or what I call an emotograph, because it's, you know, coming from my own
Yeah.
translation, if you will, so.
And also, I feel like when you're out there and you're feeling the light and the humidity and, you know,
Right.
whatever's happening, I feel like you really have a talent to bring that into
Right.
the painting.
And, you know, the smells and the difficulties, and, I mean, it's not difficult, come on, I'm a painter. I do pictures from an easel, you know, it's not exactly like slave labor, but the joy of realizing that you've really gotten the most, you've run the most out of a place, you really, really looked and been there, and you've entertained the passerby who come and ask you a million different questions, which I really thought I was gonna dislike as a painter, but it turned out to be really the best thing of all, is to have that sort of interaction, because, you know, they give you opinions here and there, but mostly they're very, you know, supportive and kind of, you know, so happy that you're doing it, because it's kind of 15th century skill that you're exhibiting out there where all the Teslas are going by and everything. But, yeah, it is that observational skill that my grandmother, my mom, all of it gave me, that I still think is the best.
How long do you work on doing, say, a painting of this size? I mean,
Oh, it's like 15, 20 minutes.
I
No,
don't
this
think
one
it was
was,
that long.
this was probably 2 weeks. This one was the one I did from the back of the van. That's the plein air one. This one I worked out in the studio. You know, you can see there's a pretty strong relationship, so it's sort of just an explosion.
So how long would you have spent then on?
2 weeks probably on that thing.
But sometimes you do the whole thing outside.
Yeah,
too.
like this is done entirely plein air. That piece was, but that took maybe 2 or 3, you know, coming back maybe 7 or 8 times over the course of 2 weeks. And, you know, you have to watch the weather, so it's not always the same. So when you start the painting out, you want to say, well, you know, it's gonna be a foul weather day, or a gray sky day, or, you know, it's gonna be blue sky, and so you sort of get a version of the sky in first to kind of inform the landscape. And the one thing you know about clouds is they do not hang around to be named. So you can do what you want with that. That's the least important thing. As long as it speaks to what you saw that day, that's probably enough. But everything below the horizon, that's where you've got to spend some time to, you know, the trees and.
But speaking of
Beautiful
clouds.
picture here. The sunspots are so evanescent, there's no way you could possibly be
Right.
here and do it.
Right.
And that you mentioned that that's something in studio, but no doubt you had sketches or whatnot which you bought in the studio, but you also take photographs to go to the studio with.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got an iPhone. I use it, especially for, you know, the cloud, especially good cloud formation that's moving at 25 miles an hour across my field of vision.
Yeah.
You know, I use that to augment, but no, I do not rid the things and copy. This was done entirely from a pasture in South Kent. The farmer with that barn let me up into this ancient pasture, which was so incredibly cool, because when you got up there and you saw, like, you know, 70 years worth of cow pies, because they really don't go many places, they hang around for a long time. But you realize that this is like an ancient place. It wasn't a new thing. That this is a farm that was those fields have been used for something similar for 300 years or so. And I think to get that, all of a sudden, that's when your hair stands on and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is my job. Because, that's the lovely thing about it, those little moments when you realize it's like, well, nobody else is here. I saw this.
So the clouds are very prominent in all of your paintings, and you were friends with Eric Sloan.
Hell yes.
So he had some kind of an influence on you for that,
Absolutely.
because, I mean, it's like almost, in that particular painting, it's more than half.
Right. And I think,
Back to that one as well. Back to that one.
I think that the clouds in the sky are very important, number one, for setting up what the weather is and what the light's gonna be like, but, let's face it, where would we be without sky? It's what sustains us. So I've always felt like giving the sky a little extra attention kind of speaks to our need to remember how important the sky is, and, it's our ceiling, it's our lungs, it's.
And I don't know how you do it, but you just have this ability that I always feel like they're just kind of floating off, coming toward
Yeah.
us, they're moving all the time, and it's I mean, you don't have to give your secrets, but.
No, it's just observation, and hopefully you get it right, and then when you get back to the studio, you can fine tune things so they make sense, because you're not gonna be perfect plein air.
Can you talk a little bit about your trompe l'oeil work? And how that came about?
Well, I was newly married in Hoboken, New Jersey, and jobless, as many of us Forstmanns tended to be, but I didn't have the money to back up the joblessness, and I had a son who was just born, and I took this little trompe l'oeil table into a place called Mabel's on Madison Avenue. It was a shop that was run by a woman named Peaches Gilbert, and her cat's name was Mabel. And the cat was always there, and she was a little shop right across from Pier de, I think, and then on 72nd.
And explain what you did on the table, so you're kind of.
Have you ever that, Jane?
Oh, okay.
So I would paint, the very first one I did was a postcard with my view from Hoboken of the city, which was like the Empire State Building and a pencil going across, and I brought it in there to Peaches to see it. She loved it, and she said, well, why don't you leave that? I had another one with, it was a tilt top table, and I left them and drove back to Hoboken. I got back to Hoboken and my phone was ringing, and she said, we sold both of them. How many more can you get me? And I said, well, I didn't have any table, I didn't have any plan whatsoever, but that's where the trompe l'oeil started, and I did maybe 280 of those tables over the years, and had quite a few luminary types had tables, but.
Well, the funny thing was, I had seen one because I found out later that Ralph Lauren had bought one, and he had it up in his home store there with that beautiful building he has on Madison Avenue. And I remember walking in, and it had like looked like keys were on the tabletop, and I think a tube of
Right.
lipstick or
Right.
something like that. And my husband and I were like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that it was one of their
And I have to
staples.
correct myself, because in the building, 2 buildings down in the Clem Real Estate Building, Paul Leonard, I don't know if any of you remember.
Yes.
He was a tremendous designer, kind of one of the early, kind of started country design with whitewashed wood and incised floors and stuff like that. And I worked with him for a summer, and that's where that Ralph Lauren table ending up in New York, because he had been his designer for a while. Paul had been for Ralph, or Ralph Lipschitz was, his time.
When you were at the museum school in Boston, did anyone teach you to paint trompe l'oeil, or is that something you just kind of developed on your
No,
own?
we had a trompe l'oeil class with a really old crusty teacher named Henry Schwartz, who became one of my favorites. Because at the museum school, it was was not like an academic style school. People, they gave no grades. You only had like a withering review at the end of every semester, which ended up being considerably more important and kind of instructive than getting grades. Grades you can crumble up and throw over your shoulder and not tell your parents about. But you get the bad review, and if you didn't perform, if you didn't put out and do your best work, the students were so ready to jump on you, and the teachers too, because they wanted you to know that, you know, you're here for a reason. Art school is not a joke, and it really wasn't. But I think a lot of kids went into that, or parents sent them to art school thinking, you know, he could draw a little, whatever, give him something to do. And the museum school didn't allow that to be, you know, they really lambasted you if you didn't work. And so that Henry Schwartz taught trompe l'oeil, and that was my first look at, you know, when he said, no, I want you to do everything exactly as it is. And I was like, what? No gesture, no suggestion, you know, no color field, the kind of things that they were also taught at the time, you know, and so that's when really I was like, okay, people still do this, it's okay. Because that's kind of what I'd always wanted to learn. I wanted to get to that nth degree, and then I was like, oh, then I'll become that abstract painter. Well, obviously, I still have not become good enough to switch directions and become an abstract painter, and I don't think I ever will. But yeah, that's where the trompe started, and it's still, you know, one of those things I call it like, it's like 6 foot away trompe l'oeil. It's not really as good as these guys in the 19th century that were absolutely amazing, but mine is more of a casual, you know, less exact.
I wish to commend you and the gallerists on the lighting of this trompe l'oeil, because it's a double trompe l'oeil.
Yeah.
The shallow thing of the unhappy daffodils is one part, but the crummy drawing of the daffodils, the light is coming from a different direction. So the light's coming from this direction of the
You are a good
daffodils.
observer.
But this light here is the perfect light for the shadow on the left side of the piece of paper.
Yeah,
So I think
no,
that
we think about that
I
a
think
lot.
that's very, very cleverly lit, and I wish.
And what's the
commend you on
title
it.
on that?
Revision.
Yeah.
Looks like those daffodils have been waiting too long.
Yeah, well, I had another, it was like, here today, gone tomorrow, that was the original title. Until I scraped off that last one, and I put it on the side, but I never threw it away. Most of them, if they fail, become palettes, because I don't like to use paper palettes, because you put them into the waste stream. So I have hundreds of failed paintings that are covered with mixed paint. This is kind of what their fate will be if they don't make it. You know, so they live on underneath many, many layers of mixed paint.
Well, we're gonna stick around for a while, so have some food, drink.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, we have no questions,
See?
okay.
I have one. I'm interested in your shirts in particular.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And like, you know, I see J. Crew, Tommy Hilfiger, what prompted you to choose those brands?
Well, originally, I didn't put the brand names in at all, but then I thought, well, you know, I gotta give credit to the makers, so, like, the Hilfiger shirt is one of the newer ones that I put the names in. But my brothers and my eldest brother was born in 1960, my youngest was born in 65, there was 4 of us. And when my mother had to put us into shirts to go out to dinner, to go to a friend's house, or go to relatives for Christmas or whatever, it was like a half an hour, 45-minute battle, like, you know, like a Civil War outbreak. And, you know, just getting them on, Mommy, she'd always button the thing up here. It was just like, it was such a crazy thing. So, and then also the Forstmann Woolen Company, they were involved in, you know, fashion of all sorts. So, and then there's another side of the family that were all incredible business people. So all of those are mixed into the original 4-shirt painting I did in 1994. And Kevin Bacon, not to drop names, but I will incessantly, bought the first one, and Kira Sedgwick said, boy, you could do that subject again and again. I was like, really? So I started, and I have done it for.
And the first one kind of represented the 4 boys.
Right. And that struggle, but all those other things wrapped into it. And then later on, you know, you realize that everybody's had an experience with a button-down shirt, men or women. I mean, I don't want to be all male about it, but that's what I did. Those are my shirts, so that's why I paint them like that. But everybody's put on their dad's shirt, or they've, you know, painted the house in an old shirt, or they, you know, get dressed up for church and put on a shirt, or they look at the incredible amount of ironing they have ahead of them. Whatever the reason is, it's a universal subject that I think continues to kind of continues to be interesting for me, because I really can't paint things that aren't fun to do. You know, I can't fake it. It will become a palette eventually, so. Yeah, the shirts just keep going. I think I've done about 100 paintings. And we have George Stephanopoulos, and I'm not gonna go, but
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
Sold a lot of them.
Yeah.
And in Europe, we've sold them all over the world, actually.
Yeah, so it was a good move to keep painting them, because that sort of keeps the studio going. And those are a few things I can guarantee are gonna sell every year, and that will kind of fuel supplies and, you know, the needs that I have to keep the studio going.
I was gonna ask, since obviously you know this area so well, you've lived here, seen everything, how do you keep your paintings fresh and how do you find your subject matters? Are you walking around? What are you doing?
Well, I do a lot of driving in the area, and like I said before, I just look all the time, and the nicest time to be driving is when you're not actually behind the wheel, and I find myself with my head totally turned to the window like a dog, because you're seeing all these things that you only see fleetingly when you're driving. And so that's really it. When things stick in my mind, I try to make a notation or remind myself later to come back to it and see if it does the same thing again. And if it does, you know, the scene, and I painted, you know, I've painted things over and over and over. There's nothing.
Well, I don't see fall or snow.
Yeah, well, I've got plenty of those back in the garage. You want winter paintings? I got them. I love painting in the wintertime. I love painting in cold weather. But as far as commercially successful, you know, not quite as much as summertime. We have sold some, but I do have a few back at the house. And fall is too beautiful. Absolutely too beautiful. That should exist in your memory only. I've seen so many terrible liquid text inflected, you know, large, heavy color, too much yellow, too much orange, in a thing that really can't replicate it properly. You know, it's to me, it's just a couple of weeks of magic where you ought to just sit down and look and just, you know, take some real time. Don't just drive to the, you know, see the leaves falling and drive through it. You really have to stop and smell and hear that as the wind sound changes through the trees as the leaves get drier, and the smell of leaves drying, and you know, the incredible things that happen in the fall. And to me, it's really the most magical thing about this region is that the actual changes. You know, winter's getting kind of weak these days, but I love that change. I love the fact that you don't have to wait too long before okay, everything's going to be different just in a few weeks. You know, so to me, it's like a rebirth. Every 3 months, you kind of get this new vantage point. So,
Eric, have you explored the human form or portraiture in your career?
I can do it. I
You can?
promise you, I can.
Do you-
I just, you know, other than the 50 or so people in this room, who I all love you very, very much. But I feel like humans, if I put a person in that landscape, even a small one, the question would be, what's that person doing? And that's
Where
not
your
what
mind
I
goes
talk
right
about.
to the person.
Yeah, and we love ourselves so much, you know, that I feel like I don't have to perpetuate that, because I knew Herb Abrams growing up, another Warren luminary, and he is one of the only, John Singer Sargent and Herb Abrams are the only two people who have two presidents in the portrait gallery in DC, the National Portrait Gallery, and I saw he was incredible. I mean, he was really one of the best portrait painters of the, serious portrait like you think about, but he had such a facility for character, such an incredible ability for space and the person in it, and the importance of that person, that I realized that you do that, or it's not something I could do part-time. I think you have to devote your entire life to that. And, quite frankly, I don't like people that much. And I love being alone.
Do you follow your mood, or is your mood created when you see a scene that you want to paint? Or do you say, I'm in a really whimsical mood and I'm going to put myself in that?
Right.
I mean, your sense of humor that comes out, not on the
Right.
the
Landscape.
plein air.
Right.
But do you say, I just feel really whimsical today, so I'm gonna sit in my studio?
Well, I think the whimsy just happens, you know, I think you kind of come across it, ideas occur to you. But there are definitely days when you're, you know, feeling, you know, a little skip in your step or whatever, and then there are those darker days when you paint other things, but.
And there have been times when you started something and you said, what do you think about this? And I go, oh, he's not in a good mood today. I don't think, it's nice, but we're not gonna be able to sell that probably.
Yeah, I have a few, but they are all palettes.
What makes you choose the different sizes? This is elongated, that's square. I mean, is it something about the scene or just?
Yeah, it's pretty much informed by what I'm looking at. And I've done a lot of very long panoramics in the 90s and early 2000s. Because you know, you kind of can't stop. If you're in a beautiful place, it's like, so is that tree more beautiful than that one? And is that, you know, so you sort of tend to go from, you know, corner to corner and you know, get informed by the need to have all of these features in there because you really can't decide what's the best. Because the holistic thing, you know, everything you're looking at actually, especially out in the Hudson Valley and eastern Dutchess County,